I'm really excited. We've had this in the works for a little bit. It's really a pleasure to get to sit down with you. Taylor Lorenz, journalist and author. Thanks for gracing the stream today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been watching like a lot of your older interviews and like some of the stuff you've been doing recently, and I'm excited to just talk with you about like your views on like social media and tech. And I know my audience is just really curious about the whole situation with like Libs of TikTok, Chaya Raichik. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah.
Yeah, how first I wanted to ask you, how did you get involved, like, writing about social media and tech? Like, I know you kind of came up in, like, the Tumblr world, but was there, like,
Yeah.
interest in it before that?
No, I was just in school and, a normal kid, and I wasn't actually that into the internet growing up at all. I didn't
Oh.
spend very much time online at all. I wanted to be an artist, and so I was in art school, and I just used to sit in my room for hours and hours and hours and do my art projects. And I worked a lot, as well. I've been working since I was, like, 11. So I don't know, I just, like, didn't I wasn't one of those people that was an early adopter. It really wasn't until I graduated. I graduated into the recession like many millennials. Right after I graduated, everything fell apart with the economy, there was
Yeah.
no jobs. I was
Yeah.
working, mostly temp jobs, retail, delivery service, stuff like that, and then, this girl at my temp job introduced me to Tumblr, and that, like, changed my life. I spent, like, 16 hours a day on Tumblr, and then I started making all these, like, viral Tumblrs, and then, yeah, a bunch of my, like, people that I was friends with, I made all my friends. That was also right when I moved to New York and right after college, and so all the friends that I made were, I'm from New York originally, but like, my new friends, I would say my
Mhm.
adult friends, I made all on the internet, and so they were other, I guess, content creators, and I hated the way the mainstream media was covering it. Like, I was just extremely anti, like, mainstream media, which is so weird that I work in it now, but, like, they just wrote about it in, like, the dumbest way, and they were so condescending, and so I was like, "I'm gonna write about the internet, but not like that." So
Couple I also grew up and was doing a lot of the same stuff at the same time. And I just wound up writing about video games, and
Yes.
similarly, how people wrote about video games as I was growing up, and like I was not a huge fan of. So I totally understand it. There was a little bit of like that, actually, like a lot. I remember in like 2009, it was like a giant conversation about whether or not video games were even like an art form or something like that.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
there was a lot of those takes. I mean, the way I remember when I started blogging, I mean, people didn't consider anyone who wrote on the internet like a real journalist, and it's just so funny things we take for granted. That was also during the panic around video game. I mean, so many of
Mhm.
the aughts was so dominated by this notion that, like, gaming was destroying the youth, and I don't know.
Just out of curiosity, have you seen like the one of the recent narratives that's been kind of making the rounds of in like the last day or so of conservative media talking about like Call of Duty and
Yes. Yes.
trans shooters? Yeah.
Yes. They love to promote the idea that, there's trans shooters out there, and it's deranged, and yeah, I've been seeing the tweets.
Do you? I know I'm kind of getting off topic because I also wanted to ask you like what your first job was, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But why do you think it has so like these ideas have so many legs? They're able to like just keep going despite the fact that there's nothing there.
There's nothing there. I mean, I think I think that with the right, I mean, I've written a bunch about this, but the right, especially the far right, has just been so adept at manipulating our media environment and leveraging the internet for their own profit and gain, and they're really, really good at driving narratives, pushing sort of the mainstream media narrative to the right in really dangerous ways. Um, And I think they latch on to these things that feed into moral panics, especially that feed into sort of like sensible liberal like moral panics because the right like the right super right wing people like they've always been anti LGBTQ and all this
Yeah.
stuff, but what they're very adept at now through the internet is radicalizing liberals basically into believing this crap. And I think they do that through gaming, through outrage about social media, through sort of just eating panic
Is
based on nothing.
is there like an element here where a lot of like these far right influencers have kind of figured out how to monetize moral panics?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Is
that's
that
there's a
yeah.
whole playbook. I mean, it really started with Gamergate in terms of this cycle where they really effectively have nailed this. I mean, it's a script now, basically, that they just run over and over again against anything they can sort of get traction on. And I mean, I'm just so shocked at how much we've regressed in terms of LGBTQ rights and the discussion around LGBTQ rights and how successfully they've been able to um, really radicalize people against trans people specifically.
Mhm.
It it's just like people that never had an opinion about trans people were are totally I mean, obviously everyone knows this and now I'm repeating it, but it's shocking. Even just to see discourse a couple years ago compared to now. And I feel like we're in a bad place because of that. And there's not enough people covering the the sort of machine that they have going on the right wing. And so you have places like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal just basically just reprinting Chris Rufo as if he's some sort of expert that we should listen to. It's insane. It's really worrying. And so, I write about that stuff and I also write a lot of fun articles about,
Yeah.
internet stuff, but that's just become such a part of the internet and so
Yeah, it is fascinating. You worked at the New York Times for a bit. Do you have
yeah.
insight into like what is the thought process that goes on at the New York Times that allows someone like Chris Rufo to just like come in and start writing these pieces that are like Chris Rufo is not to my knowledge not like a really serious actor. Like
No,
he's like
the
a hatchet
grifter.
man. Yeah.
Yes, he's a joke. I
Yeah.
mean, I know. I can't believe I worked at the New York Times for so many years and like didn't get myself fired. Like I feel like their like anti-trans stuff has really escalated really since I've left because I think I mean that and the Palestine stuff is like
Mhm.
it's gone so off the rails. I think also they have a new editor in charge who feeds into this stuff in a really bad way. When I was there, Dean Baquet at least was slightly better, although it's really it's crazy. I don't know. I was talking to a friend of mine whose family is immigrants, and I was just like, God, like what like was the Times always this bad? And she was like, yeah, it's always been bad. And like maybe I just wasn't like realizing it. But I do think that the anti-trans stuff specifically has really I've been at the Washington Post for about 2 years. And I think that it's really gotten bad in the last 2 years because certainly when I was there, they were publishing some bad stuff. Every mainstream media outlet publishes bad stuff. Um, but it's really gotten bad. And I think part of it is the editorial leadership and these people like giving, massive amounts of power and attention to people like Pamela Paul or David Leonhardt, who also publishes tons of dangerous health misinformation and other stuff about disabled people. And so that's bad. And we should hold them accountable. And this whole side of the media, like the digital media companies that actually pushed the legacy companies to be more accountable, companies like Vice or BuzzFeed that
Mhm.
had these younger journalists that would sort of hold them accountable, that whole layer of media has been dismantled. So I also think that like the gloves are off a little bit where they know they can write this stuff and yeah, people get mad online, but ultimately that drives clicks and they don't really the media itself is not holding them to account.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, because you also like wrote for a lot of these sites that have just kind of like
They're
disappeared.
gone. I know my
Yeah.
old bylines. They're
Oh,
all
I feel that as like I wrote for websites that like scrubbed like almost a decade of
yeah.
my work off the internet. So I feel that on like a personal level too. Um, how much of like these companies going under can be attributed to like their poor business decisions and like the of course the whole Facebook inflating numbers fiasco for the pivot to video, and how much of it, because in looking back, it kind of seems like there might be a lot of intention behind going after these companies. I feel like Gawker might have been kind of like a template for some
It
of
was.
these.
Oh, it's a blueprint
Yeah.
for how to destroy an independent media company. Um, I mean, they were vulnerable, I will say. Unfortunately, that entire digital media bubble was VC backed, and
Hmm.
what VCs want is scale above all else, and so they pumped millions and millions of dollars into these companies to get them this level of scale that the digital ad business was never going to support. It just wasn't. All that ad money is going to Facebook and Google now, and
Hmm.
I think a lot of them also had cozy relationships with the platforms, thinking that this is, "Oh, we have this symbiotic relationship," um, which of course was never the case either. I think they had to learn that lesson the hard way. It's really sad. I wish that a lot more of those companies grew in a sustainable way and focused on owning their audience and all of that stuff, as well as putting out distributed content. I'm a big believer in still putting content out in places and meeting your audience where they're at. I just think that the scale that they were forced to chase because of the amount of venture capital funding they took on was always a recipe for disaster. And that's, ultimately what happened to a lot of places that myself and so many other millennial journalists got our start in. Now, there's no place like that for young journalists. So I think that's concerning.
Yeah, I was watching the recent interview you did. I forget who it was with, but you talked about this figure, Balaji Srinivasan,
Yes.
and that just struck me as like suddenly it seems more like a lot of these investments and these VCs could also be just doing a lot of burying these inconvenient outlets on purpose.
Yes, that's what they wanna do.
Yeah.
Yes, and they will sue you into oblivion. The same people that go crow all day, Elon Musk, about free speech, these are the people that are suing media companies out of business, and as somebody that has dealt with defamation suits for my reporting,
Mhm.
of course, they're always dismissed in the end, like, if you're, generally, although not always, but hopefully, right? Like, most of these are baseless lawsuits. But the point is to waste your time and money and to intimidate you and to
Mhm.
make it so that you're not gonna do that story next time, right? You're not gonna do that dicey story because you know that Claire Locke is gonna come calling and, try to bankrupt the website that you write for. And God forbid you're an independent journalist, then you have no legal cover. And I think that's really terrifying. And it's chilling speech and reporting.
Yeah, I was struck in that interview because you mentioned, and what was interesting to me is that usually these figures will hide behind um, legal teams or lawyers in order to get rid of inconvenient voices. But you mentioned Balaji in particular had led a doxing campaign against you.
Oh, yeah. He was, giving people, crypto rewards for, posting information about me. This was, at the height of Clubhouse, if you remember that app when there was rooms, like Taylor Lorenz and other journalists that should be hanged, all of this stuff, and the co-founders of Clubhouse, of course, thought there's no problem with any of this. We don't care. Um, you know, that
How?
women journalists or people are hosting these doxing rooms. And I mean, I don't care about that. Ultimately, I'm a reporter with an enormous amount of privilege and protection. So they've doxed me so many times. I'm like, how many more times can you dox my boring family that has nothing, you know, but my colleagues, especially, I mean, one of my colleagues, at the times, her family is immigrants and, does not live in a great neighborhood. And when you send the police to her house, it's scary. You don't know what's going to happen, right? Like when the police are called to my parents' house, it's like, they're like, oh, okay, this again, but
Mhm.
ultimately so I think that's what's so scary. And what Balaji talks about when he talks about doxing vulnerable journalists and that great story that Cade Metz did on him years ago, um, he's talking about women and underrepresented groups and who are these journalists that we can target that are not privileged white men, basically, and how can we drive them out of the industry?
Yeah, it's there's so many layers to this that like I actually sought out the 6 hour long podcast that you guys talk
Oh
about.
God.
I haven't gotten through all of it yet, but it is absolutely fascinating to me that there are these tech figures who are broadly accepted in like polite mainstream society, and he just goes on a podcast and he just lays out an explicitly fascist plan where like, oh citizens who are loyal will march lockstep with the police in gray uniforms under the watchful eye of our lovely surveillance police drones. And I like, he's just saying this as if it's a normal thing to say, like as if and to my knowledge, he hasn't really gotten any pushback on this.
Zero pushback. No,
Yeah.
he's lauded. I mean, and he's just one of many of these people.
Mhm.
And I think the thing is too, a lot of them are not necessarily household names, but they have an enormous amount of political power and influence. And I think, look, people know Elon Musk, right? They know he's crazy, but this whole the rot is it's at the core of Silicon Valley. It's Mark Andreessen, it's that entire universe of people, men, really. And they're incredibly dangerous. And
Mhm.
then you have these tech podcasts or tech reporters, and no hate. I mean, there's Ryan Mack and other tech reporters do amazing like investigative work, but you also have a ton of boosterism, unfortunately. And
Mhm.
a lot of these male tech reporters, because they're not affected by these people, and because they go to brunches with them, and they also, they're cozy with them. They're from the same socioeconomic backgrounds. They give them a pass, and they're not held accountable, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah, it struck me that in particular there's an idea again pushed by Balaji, and also again like you said not limited to him, of essentially recreating company towns.
Yes.
But like, oh, but it's different this time because it's in the cloud. It's all tech. It's a
And it's a
tech
police
company
state.
cloud.
It's like a police state company town. It's like,
Yeah.
this is a company town, and by the way, you have to be loyal to this company, and by the and look, this political movement has had some success. Like, they successfully ousted Chesapeake, the
Hmm.
DA. Like, they go after, they target any sort of progressive lawmaker, and of course, they're really active in California, where I live too. But they're becoming, I mean, these people are incredibly influential in Miami. You have the mayor of Miami inviting these people to their, to speak and to at dinners and things. And even in New York, you
Hmm.
have groups of people that so it's entering our culture, and there's not many reporters to even cover it. And so it's scary. And I feel the same way when I listen to them, because I'm like, oh my God, they're just saying it out loud. Like, does anyone care?
Yeah, like, does anyone care that this guy who's saying it out loud is also listened to by like 25 other billionaires that are active across America who all think that this is a brilliant idea, and the amount of power that they wield is incalculable.
Yeah. And
um
and
yeah.
I mean, this he also has a huge following on Twitter and stuff. Like, young people listen to him. Like, people, the problem is that these people are so, Gary Tan is another one. He runs Y Combinator. If you want
Hmm.
to get into the Silicon Valley startup pipeline, these are the gatekeepers. Who do you think gets in to lead these companies? Who do you think is funding these startups funding rounds? These people that want to bring in fascism.
Yeah.
And so you can see how the tech industry has become so toxic, because it's built to boost this ideology structurally.
And I, so you mentioned a little bit like these I guess I'll just say it bluntly. How much is crypto embedded into all of this? Because it seems, just from my cursory overview of everything, that like all of these tech guys, all of these, like they're looking to basically create like a currency that they can personally control. And
Yeah.
it's, when taken through the lens of like people who also want like these mini police states that they also have total control over, it gets a lot more sinister than what they tend to project, which is, we're freeing the currency from the evil Federal Reserve.
Right.
Yeah, it gets a bit more sinister, and I'm just curious your take on that.
100%. I mean, I think that there's that great documentary on HBO called, what is it? Not Acapulco. It's the Acapulco crypto Anarchapulco. It's about it's crypto fascist like movement basically. It's like they're extreme libertarian, like crypto right wing people that tried to build this like they tried to have this festival. It ends up with multiple people dead. There's like
Oh God.
four people or five men in the documentary with like there's like John Galt, there's Juan Galt, there's like John Galton, like they're all reading the same books, which is really just one book.
The same book. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that crypto is just they want to control the financial system, and crypto. So much of crypto is this like hyper capitalist version of the internet where it's like you can have an enormous amount of XYZ coin and that gives you control and financial control over certain communities, and that's what they want to see, and they want to deregulate the entire financial system as well, and crypto allows them to sort of operate outside the bounds of our current financial structure. So yeah, it's very embedded in all of this. Not to say all, there's also this sort of like utopian vision for crypto. Unfortunately, as I always tell, and I've written about that version of crypto, like there's a lot of people that they want to support, more freedom, and our financial system is exploitative in so many ways. Unfortunately, this crypto ecosystem is just so overrun with scammers and um, right-wing crazy people that it's hard to like, it's hard to seek control. But I'm not totally anti-crypto as a concept. I
Hmm.
think that the idea of the blockchain and the transparency and all of that, these are good concepts, right? But it's just the way that it materializes ends up being very broken. And a lot of it is just money laundering, like rewarding schemes, pumping up a token to enrich your friend. It's just scams.
Yeah, I wanted to talk just like touch a little bit on like it seems from like an outsider point of view on social media that like crypto is like its own wild west world when it comes to like social media, like influencers and like the kind of content that they make and like everything that they have going on. Like it it feels like sometimes like I'm looking into the social media equivalent of like a casino,
Yes.
and I don't exactly know, I don't know how to put it other than that, right? Like, um, what what's your take, I guess, on like the social media presence of like crypto influencers?
They're some of the wildest personalities on the internet. So
Yeah.
in some ways, I have to say I love them for entertainment value. A lot of them are pretty toxic. There's also people that are kind of adjacent to the industry that are eh, like Tiffany Fong or something, right? She did a bunch of those early interviews with SBF. She's a YouTuber, but also holds a ton of crypto, has made her money in crypto. Like, there's interesting figures. I think there's people that are interested in it from an economic standpoint, and they're just into finance and new business models, and new currency models, and that's great, right? Those people are fine.
Yeah.
Then you have the scammers that are launching the shit coins, and they're very intertwined with like the prank bro YouTube culture. I am glad that we're a little bit past it. Like crypto kind of comes in waves. There was such a very manufactured hype cycle in 2021 around it, and you had all of these male tech journalists just chugging, like drinking the Kool-Aid, like this is the new internet. It's like the new internet is not going to be built by a bunch of like VCs passing around the same $100 million to each other. Like that's stupid. It's also just not a very consumer friendly, you know, it's hard to sort of understand, and for the average person to understand what an NFT is, or what sort of crypto should I buy. I mean, this is how so many people got scammed in FTX and other things like that. So Yeah, but I will say that some of them are really entertaining, and I love their, like, cope and the way that they document the rises and falls. In that sense, it's kind of funny. It's just sad because ultimately a lot of them are selling a lie. It's a casino, like you said, it's casino capitalism, and they're sort of selling that to their desperate audience, and that's very predatory and sad.
Is there any way, like, to kind of fix that problem, or is that do you think that's kind of, like, inherent to, like, what crypto is, at least currently?
No, I think actually we could, definitely have a better system. I mean, I think the problem isn't as much crypto as it is these desperate people buying into it because they've been fed a lie, and I think that we wouldn't have people do things like that or buy meme stocks. It's the same sort of circle. If they weren't desperate, and there's this idea, which is correct, by the way, that, like, our economy is fundamentally broken. It's built to reward the 1%. You can work really, really hard your entire life and lose it overnight because you have to go to the hospital or something, and so a lot of people think, "Fuck it, I'll buy my lottery ticket. I'll put some money in Bitcoin because what else? You know, that everything is going to shit anyway, and this has as much chance of working out as anything else," and that's a shame. If we had more economic stability and if we had a better economy that provided for everyone, crypto wouldn't sure, it would be a thing. It's an interesting financial model, but you wouldn't have the exploitation that you have and the scams, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it would make it a lot harder to take advantage of people in
Yeah,
that way. Yeah.
definitely.
Um, okay. So kind of pivoting a little bit. Um, so you kind of came up in this Tumblr era,
Yeah.
and how plugged in were you to Gamergate as it happened?
Oh, extremely.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew people involved in that. It was horrible. I mean, I was a blogger at that time and I was working on the internet, and so I think it affected so many people. I think myself and many other women in journalism saw what was happening and wanted to sound the alarm about it. I obviously wasn't affected myself. I didn't really have that, like, I wasn't on that side of the internet where I was writing about games or I wasn't,
Mhm.
being targeted in that way, thank God. Um, but it was really bad. And there were a lot of people that were driven out of the industry basically because of that. But yeah, that was a bad time.
Did you did you
Now
ever
we live in it.
yeah, did you ever foresee that it would come to, like, affect so many other things, like, coming down the line? Like, just it feels like it's kind of like, if you wanna understand, like, what's going on in politics or the internet or social media today, like, that's, like, a really important event or time period to understand. Did
Yeah,
did it feel like that at the time to you, or not so much?
I wrote about this in my book. I think absolutely. I think many people that paid attention to the online space felt like this is a blueprint that was used so effectively to manipulate the media, right? That's like what they did really well. Because if you look back at the coverage, that's not how it was being covered. It was this both sides journalism that was feeding this campaign. I think the traditional media was such a key part of that, of laundering that hateful campaign, and has continued to do that. And so I think, it definitely made me concerned. There's that great, I think it's a Huffington Post article, like everything is Gamergate now, and I think it's very true. I think that, like, basically what it did, what Gamergate's legacy is it provided this blueprint for how to weaponize the internet and social media. And conservatives have just run with that. That is everything now. They just do it to everyone. They were doing it to Miss Rachel, I saw this week as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Like, I mean, they run the same outrage machine. And I think now there's slightly more awareness of it, not necessarily from senior media people, but certainly from the average internet user. Whereas back then there wasn't. You sounded crazy. I mean, I remember trying to explain it to one of my bosses, and I felt like I sounded like a QAnon person, but I was like, "No, no, no, it's all connected," and da da da.
Yeah, I remember writing at the time just like a, "Hey, here's how all of this happened," and I remember writing it down, and there was just this distinct moment where I was like, "This all sounds like nonsense, but it's dictating, like, the actions of, like, thousands of people," and, like, one of my friends had to, like, change their name and go into hiding, on the other like,
God.
like, it's it it it's it was
Well,
really vicious.
I think what they realized too is that reputational harm is the most effective way to sort of deplatform someone in the media or someone publicly on the internet. So the goal is obviously they were doxing and getting people swatted and stuff, but the goal remains with these campaigns to it's essentially to discredit and deplatform mostly women or whoever, right? It's to terrify you into silence while also discrediting you in the eyes of the public. And that is what the media continues to play in. And I mean, look at what happened to Claudine Gay or, some of these college presidents that have been targeted by Rufo and others. It's like you just see the same playbook over and over against companies, against people, against institutions, all of it.
And you found yourself on like the receiving end of this first, so
Yeah.
you know firsthand. What what kind of helped you get through it?
I don't know. I haven't handled it great. I mean, I like it it's been it's like what is it? The frog in boiling water. It's like you
Oh no.
slowly um yeah, I now I can mostly handle anything, I think, because everything has ever happened. Like I'm like everything that's bad has happened almost, knock on wood. Um and it's fine. And I'm like, whatever, okay. Again, you doxed my parents again. And so it's at the point where they just make up conspiracies now because there's sort of nothing left for them. And that I think I've talked to so many other women about this, but it's like you have to like plow through and get to that point. But you have to go through a lot to get there. And it was really hard. It's been difficult to deal with. And I haven't always dealt with it the best way. Like sometimes I've gotten really overwhelmed or just gone into hiding or cried or whatever, or been a bitch to someone online because of it, or I don't know. Like I feel like I'm overly sensitive. But it's just I've gotten better at managing it. And I also trust my instincts because I think I used to always give people the benefit of the doubt,
Mm.
and now I give no one the benefit of the doubt.
That's fair. I just wanted to say, like, publicly, you reached out to me while I was getting particularly shellacked on social media, and I really appreciated it. You had some kind words
Aw.
for me, and I think that makes it a lot easier to deal with, like when they're
Yeah.
when people show you that solidarity.
I feel so protective of people and also just seeing other people go through it. It makes you like when you've been in that, you're like, "Oh my god, are you like how are you doing?" And that's what so many people did to me too. I mean, I think like having a very offline like friend group I mean, actually my friends are very online, but like, they're solid, like they know me. You have to have a very strong sense of self. And I think that's what's so hard because these people will try to like warp you and make you into this thing. And the way that I am perceived, even on the right wing internet today, is like this crazy, like bizarro version of me that I'm like, what who is that person? It's not me, you know? But it's crazy, and every time you get pushback or every time people wanna come for you for something, you see them latch on to those right-wing conspiracies and platform that and the cycle kicks up. Whether they're leftist or centrist or on the far right, like, everyone is vulnerable to feeding into these campaigns, often unwittingly, and that's what's really dangerous. So, I think we all just need to be careful
Yeah.
that we're not doing that.
Was your first experience with that, was that, like, being the target, was that after, like, you began engaging with, like, Libs of TikTok?
No, no. Oh my
Was
god,
that before
no.
that?
That was
Okay.
way before. I cover, obviously, as you know, I cover YouTubers and content creator like, the content creator industry.
Mhm.
So, my entire career, I've dealt with crazy fandoms, like the Jake Paulers, the
Is that wait,
PewDiePie.
is that what they call themselves?
They do.
They call themselves the Jake
The Jake
Paulers?
Paulers, the
Oh,
Jake Paulers.
that's such a bad name.
So, literally the worst fandom name ever, and, thankfully, he doesn't have the clout that he used to have, right? But, like, back in the Team 10 days and, like, the PewDiePie days, I mean, I wrote a story very early on in Mr. Beast's career before he kind of educated himself. He was saying homophobic slurs, and I wrote about it. Now, I will say he has grown, he has apologized, he has stood by his trans colleague, no beef with him, but I cover things that content creators do, and often it's bad behavior, especially during this prank era of YouTube
Mm.
when I was covering things pretty critically. There was just a lot of misogyny. Same thing with Vine, right? Like, um, and also I wrote about a lot of bad stuff on platforms with content creators used to really hate because they would blame the journalists for like an advertiser leaving YouTube or whatever. I think now there's more understanding of nuance. But so fandoms, I've always had those people have doxed me way before any of the right wing people. When COVID hit, it was kind of like everyone got online and suddenly everyone sort of started to pay attention to the internet in a way that I think they hadn't before. And also my profile rose because Tucker Carlson was doing so many segments
Yeah.
on me. So Tucker and I had written about right-wing influencers, like, I covered Charlottesville very famously, Milo Yiannopoulos Free Speech Week, like, I had covered all of it.
Yeah.
But COVID really was, like, the accelerant. And then and then Chaya, of course, whenever I wrote that article, like, 2 years ago, she's been on but she's just kind of, you know, I think fundamentally she doesn't have I don't I think she's so dismal in person and so uncharismatic that she will never actually scale herself to the level of some of these other influencers. If there's any silver lining with that woman, it's that she cannot she's kind of a weird Twitter is her medium and Twitter is becoming less and less relevant. So that
Yeah.
part's good. But she's a terrorist obviously and
Yeah. I want to ask you more about this, but real quick, I did want to ask, is there some amount of just like satisfaction seeing Tucker Carlson's like profile diminish? Is there for you? Like I know that like
yeah.
he attacked you a lot.
I know, he was always doing and it was always over the most random shit. He was, like, mad that I celebrated, like, I, like, posted some generic International Women's Day thing, and he, like, made a whole, like it was always just random shit, and it's never about my work, like, that's what's
No.
so telling is, like, these people rarely have issues with my article. Maybe it's my Libs of TikTok story, like, if I write about them, but they fundamentally don't really it's more about this person that they made me into, but yeah, I mean, sometimes there's justice in the world, and sometimes these people lose their platform, and that's great. I think it shows a that deplatforming works, and it
Hmm.
shows that, we need to hold these people accountable.
Do you
So that's good.
do you remember like there was a time period in the internet where people were arguing that like deplatforming only made people stronger?
Yeah, and
That was
it's
such a weird time.
but also I have to say there's another poisoned like, it's so funny because as somebody that was so critical, especially of, like, the New York Times coverage I covered the 2016 election. I was literally at the Hilton in the room when Trump,
Yeah.
became president. Like, I covered that entire campaign and, by the way, was very vocal about his massive online fandom that the media was ignoring. Um, there was there's this idea now, which thank God people understand the concept of platforming. But now there's this total misunderstanding of like power dynamics in media where they think any critical coverage of these people is platforming. That could not be further from the truth. It is so important to cover these people critically and hold them to account. What we shouldn't do is give them puff pieces which is what they were doing, which is like, that's platforming.
Yeah.
Writing critically about these people is not platforming.
Yeah, the image that comes to my mind was what his name's not Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah,
Oh, what's
Jimmy
his name? Like
Fallon.
rubbing Donald Trump's hand.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's that like normalizing. And it's the like positive spin on it. Like that is platforming. And but it's like I just noticed that from certain people now, like because I still cover these people that are like, oh, if you just ignore them, they'll go away. It's like, no, whether I write about Chaya Raichek or not, she has been appointed to the Oklahoma State School Board and she is making decisions. You cannot ignore the you cannot ignore that. Should we ignore her bullshit tantrums? Yes, generally we should. But no, we should report very critically and document the harms that she's doing because that actually does cut off opportunities. That prevents a lot of these people from getting the mainstream traction that they could get without critical reporting.
Hmm. So circling back to Libs of TikTok, can you kind of walk us through that original like what exactly are like conservatives to this day will accuse you of like doxing her, and
Yeah,
my
that's
understanding is
not
that
doxing.
that is not the case whatsoever. Can you like walk us through that?
Yeah. First of all, this woman was tweeting under her own name. Okay, let's not forget she was tweeting from January 6th under her own name.
Mhm.
So that's crazy. um, but yeah, I mean, I had been following, as you know, like I cover online influence. I had been following her specific account, had really come, it was the summer before, I guess that would have been summer 2021.
Mhm.
I suddenly started to hear about her a lot more and she started to grow. Um, and she was growing at a pretty she was growing steadily, but most importantly, she was followed and amplified by these really powerful figures on the right and people like Joe Rogan and other influencers like podcasters, the Daily Wire people. And she was essentially acting as this assignment editor, like a shadow assignment editor for the
Mm.
entire right-wing media ecosystem. So she would like find something, she would latch onto it, she would generate outrage around like the groomer panic or whatever and target specific schools and then that would be on Fox News the next day. So she had this uh, power, this soft power really, and direct power, and no one was acknowledging it or covering it or like really examining like who this woman was. And of course, by that time she was running this anonymous account that also had received millions of dollars in funding from Seth Dillon at the Babylon Bee. So
Yes.
um there was I remember talking to my editor because for months I was like watching this woman and I'm like, oh, she's not like I don't want to cover her until it's at the point where if I this is gonna like we need to stop like somebody needs to like step in and make sure that this woman doesn't get more mainstream because at that point like right before I covered her she was being amplified by like mainstream liberals.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is really bad. This is really bad because we need to examine this woman and really also know who is behind this account because this anonymous account is being trusted by people and we need to know who's behind it. So there was this reporter or this he's kind of like a data investigative guy, Travis Brown, who had
Mhm.
done tons of research and he had already like tweeted about her identity kind of um I don't think he had like really confirmed it, but he had tweeted, he had like done some digging on it. So it was like out there in the ether that it was this woman, but nobody had really spoken to her or tried to confirm it. And I was like, I'm just going to report this out. I obviously reported it out. I famously visited her house because she wasn't answering my request for comment. And I was like, if I'm going to put this woman's name all over the internet, like you need to seek comment. And so I'm going to show up and politely ask for comment. Ironically, her tweeting out that picture of me at her doorstep is what confirmed her identity to the point that we could run the story, which is so hilarious. And Glenn Greenwald participated in it because it's like we would have probably still had to say allegedly or like all this stuff, but then she confirmed that that was her, and so we were like, okay. Um. Anyway, so I don't remember what I was saying, but basically, I knew that she was gonna be pissed about it and all that stuff, but I felt like it was really important, and it
Yeah.
was, and yes, I thought, even if she gets, like, 1,000,000 followers from this first of all, she would have gotten that anyway eventually, like, she was
Yeah.
really growing, and the money that which had come about a month before I wrote my story, they were, like, buying Twitter promotions and all this shit to help her out. Um, I hate this notion that, like, "Oh, we just don't talk about her and she would have gone away." No, 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 no.
No.
If we didn't report on her, this woman would have been on NBC News. That's how bad it was. You had assignment producers for liberal media outlets retweeting her and citing her stuff. And so I think now at least, yes, she has her right-wing audience, but people know that she's bad, a bad faith actor, and that's the most
Yeah.
important thing.
Yeah, it's
Sorry to rant,
no,
but
no, it's okay because it's really interesting because a lot of people seem to, and I think it's good to reiterate, seem to like be under the impression that she's just a hardworking American who started a Twitter account,
no, no, no,
a
no.
TikTok account, but no, she was getting a lot of money to do
Yes.
this.
Also, let's not forget that she was an insurrectionist. Okay? This
Yeah.
woman stormed the Capitol. Like, I know she said she wasn't actually in the Capitol, but she was right outside and she was an insurrectionist. She was participating in the January 6th insurrection. This woman was radicalized. Um, she had an enormous amount of money behind her and powerful interests in boosting her. She's, unfortunately an important figure on the right. And what she is adept at is driving these campaigns. Although I would say she's been neutered slightly. She was also, by the way, you want to talk about doxing? She was doxing and getting teachers fired across the country. She was tweeting out LGBTQ people's phone numbers, personal addresses, attacking the Trevor Project, like causing an enormous harm to LGBTQ people. And by the way, when those teachers or principals would go to like Google this account, they thought that she's a legitimate person because the only media coverage of her was like Libs of TikTok, like she's holding, people to account. Like there was this like New York Post puff
Mhm.
piece and stuff like that. So I just also wanted to have something that like the school systems could share and just be like, this woman is a menace. Do not fire your teacher because she's tweeting about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think to this day, like her profile picture is her like gloatingly holding a USA Today
Will Carliss's
piece.
great piece on it. But you know what's so can I just vent for
Yeah,
what
go for it.
bothers me so much? I have done such critical reporting on this woman. I think I've written 3 or 4 stories about her that are very quite in-depth report. I mean, I wrote a whole piece about the harm that she's caused in Oklahoma to trans people. Will Carliss has also reported and done great reporting on her. But Will has never been accused of platforming her or feeding her. Like when she did that, I just think that there's this like level of there's something weird about me, I think also because 'cause we're both women with brown hair or something where, like, people like to, like, make this thing of, like, Taylor versus Child, like, there's plenty of other reporters that have since done tons of critical work, and Will is actually one of them. Will has done phenomenal work, and I think people should give him a lot of credit too, and, he's not one of those people platforming her, and I know that she's, like, proud to be called a stochastic terrorist or whatever. That's an indictment of her, that's not an indictment of Will's reporting because he's
Yeah.
a great reporter.
Yeah, no, I did want to kind of I wanted to get your view on this just because it always strikes me very weird that there's like this like she gets real bomb threats sent to real people and
Yes.
like schools full of children or like businesses that have tons of people who visit them every day or libraries that can be filled with people from all walks of life and she thinks that's funny and I
It's
don't
sick.
I don't get it.
It's sick. I mean, she's obsessed with gender, and I thought it was so telling too when I was interviewing her, and she was like, I didn't know an LGBTQ person growing up."
Mhm.
She grew up in essentially, like, an extreme religious community where she was incredibly sheltered, and now she has this, like, hatred and is on this crusade when she doesn't even know what she's talking about. Like, she literally couldn't even name, like, one single reason why, like, trans people were allegedly so bad. Like, she just cannot she has this, like, hateful ideology that I don't even think that she totally understands. I think she's addicted to the attention and addicted to the clout that it's given her, the access that it's given her, that Ron DeSantis is relying on her to write legislation against gay people. Like, it's power ultimately, and I think power corrupts, and I think she's had power. She's had power in that industry for a while now, unfortunately.
Can I ask, given all of that, and she seems to hate you in particular,
Yeah.
um, how on earth did you get her to agree to do an interview? Like,
Oh, well, she
how did
didn't
that
wanna do it.
happen?
I had been trying to get like I said, I wrote this, like, 2,500 word piece that was this, like, in-depth look at the harm that she had caused to LGBTQ people, and I had spoken to LGBTQ youth and also people like I mean, one of the first teachers that she had gotten fired was a mentor of Nex Benedict, and I had written about Nex's death and all of that, and so I wanted to take this look and be like, "This is a woman that is quite literally appointed to the state school board." And yet, she has played a role in this, like, horrible hate campaign against young LGBTQ youth in the state, and here's a look at it, and so, obviously, this piece took weeks. It was very extensive. And so I had been trying to get comment because you cannot, it's so hard, the
Mhm.
post is very old school. You got to get comment. Same thing that happened the first time. It's like I'm always chasing comment from this woman. And she always sends back some weird sexual reply. Like it's bizarre. She always sends back something like, I'm not trying to date you, or it's really weird. I have to say, for someone so obsessed with LGBTQ like gender stuff, it's like I'm like, why are you sending me like weird DMs like that? So anyway, she says in this like offhand reply, like, you want comment so badly, like, Why don't you meet me in person or something? And I said, oh, absolutely. Of course. She was going to give me 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
5 minutes. That was it. And she was just going to give me her comment in person. And I was like, you know what? I would love that. Um, so, and then she immediately tried to back out. Um, it was kind of like, it took her a minute. And then I was like, okay, I'll meet you anywhere. She was coming from the Valley. So I was like, let's meet in Studio City. And I think she just totally I think she backed herself into a corner where she made that comment, and then I said I was gonna I was like, "If you don't show up, I'm posting that you didn't show," and
Yeah.
so I think she felt like, "Okay, I have to show up. Fuck, I said this." She shows up, and then she sits down and then proceeds to talk to me for an hour, which is so crazy.
So
And
she was
yeah.
literally only supposed to be there to give you comment for your
Which
story.
she kind of, like, didn't like, I think what she wanted like, the goal of every right-wing influencer that I've ever dealt with is to get content. And what they wanna do is they wanna get you what they usually do is they show up, they antagonize you, they start filming, right? They're antagonizing you, and their goal is to just get this clip that they can misrepresent online and just, smear you. Nick Fuentes, Milo, like, all of these people, I've been through this rodeo with them. So, that's what I expected from her. She shows up with her camera guy, um, and she's, like, wearing a T-shirt with my face on it, and she has this box of masks because 'cause I'm immunocompromised, and so she's like, "Oh, do you want a mask or whatever?" And I was like, "No, thanks, I have one, like, I don't always wear one outside, but since we're face to face and low key you're an anti-vaxxer, like, I'm gonna wear my mask." Um, and so she's like, "Okay," and she puts it down, and I think what she didn't rea I think that she truly thinks or thought, as she talked about this later, 'cause all these conservatives were, like, railing on her for doing that interview and making them look bad or whatever. I think she thought that I was the person, the caricature online, that I would get triggered and have a meltdown or cry because like, she's wearing this T-shirt with my face on it, and I was just really polite and asked her a bunch of questions, and I was trying to wait to ask her questions about the Oklahoma stuff because I wanted to get her on the record with as much as possible, basically. That's why I'm moving through questions so quickly in the beginning 'cause I thought I
Mhm.
had no time with her. Um, and yeah, then and it was really weird. She was just, she's just totally unprepared. Like she couldn't control the conversation. She couldn't ask me like she's not a journalist, obviously. And so yeah, and then by the end of it, I was like, all right, I guess I got all my questions. She's like, okay, I'll get an Uber home. I was like, what? What? You're an idiot. And then my favorite part is I was recording.
Yeah.
So I of course was recording. I had my tripod set up, but her social media person had better footage. And I was like, I want that footage. So I was like, can you airdrop me that footage? And she was like, "Oh, okay." And then I was like, "Can you actually airdrop it a second time? I wanna make sure I got it all." And she was like, "Okay." And I was like, "This woman is so delusional that she thinks that, first of all, why are you giving a reporter your own that is so stupid." And obviously she later acknowledged that, but, like, you know, the better footage, like, it was just funny. But I wanted to put it all online because I knew that she was gonna try to cut it up and
Oh,
misrepresent
yeah.
it. And also she said a bunch of newsworthy stuff, like endorsing the great replacement theory and stuff that other reporters could I wasn't it wasn't gonna be part I wasn't gonna do like 10 stories about what she said, but I wanted other people. And before I put the, video up, by the way, I sent it to a bunch of trans and LGBTQ people to to view because I was like, I don't wanna put it online if there's any way that this could be bad or and everyone was like, "Oh my god, she looks terrible. Like, you have to post this," because it just showed how completely, full of shit she is, basically. She couldn't defend a single one of her viewpoints.
She didn't even seem to know fully what she was saying like half the time. Like
No.
it was just like parroting words. She couldn't describe what was behind the ideas. It was
She
very
couldn't
bizarre.
literally could not name a single harm that trans people I mean, nothing she couldn't she doesn't like it's interesting because and I saw all the conservatives were mad that she did that interview because there are people that the questions I was asking that have good answers for those questions, whether they're they're bad in the sense that I would argue I completely disagree with them, but they have a fundamentalist ideology that has this regressive view of gender, and they can defend that ideology. She could not even defend the most basic ideology. And I think that just shows how full of shit her entire online shtick is, because she doesn't, there's nothing underneath it. It's just hate for hate's sake, for attention. And so,
Yeah. So I wanted to just real quick, just because some of the people in my audience wanted to know. Um, after you did that interview, you wound up like attracting a lot of people being angry at you on Blue Sky.
well, here's the thing, Blue Sky was the only people that were angry at me, and
Yeah.
I think it's because I didn't Blue Sky doesn't have video.
Mm.
So, and I took the promotional like copy that I had put in Slack basically, and I just copy pasted it onto a bunch of social platforms. And I was sort of trying to explain what was in the link, but instead of being like, read this 2,500 word deeply reported piece that I did centering LGBTQ youth experience in Oklahoma, I was like, watch me chat with Chaya Rychek or something. I like posted it in the most inflammatory way possible and then left
Oh, something
that.
just happened with your mic.
When I back, and so people didn't watch the interview. I mean, I think many people didn't watch the interview, period, and were mad. And it was really weird because I was like, "No, just watch," but there's no clips. So people aren't gonna sit, like, you have to sit through quite a bit of that interview to even get through it. Um, and I was getting so annoyed that day, and I was like, "What the fuck? Like, why are these people, like, ma" and I talked to this one girl, Katie, who's a trans woman, who's amazing and very funny, and I was talking to her and she was like, I think, well, first of all, you tweeted it in the dumbest way possible. And people are not seeing the video. And they have a lot of misconceptions, which I totally get. Like, they were like, is this monetized? Like, what is this? Why is this on your YouTube channel? The reason it was on my YouTube channel is actually because I didn't want it monetized in the ad player. And also because I don't want to put that on the Washington Post. Like, we had this whole discussion about our editorial standards, but that is ultimately like source material for reporting for a story. It's not its own thing. And the only reason I put it there was basically so that one, people could see that she's completely full of shit, and other reporters could use her comments to ultimately do their own reporting. And also so that she couldn't misleadingly clip any of it. So I think there was just so much misunderstanding. And then I think also a lot of other trans people, which I totally get, and Katie was explaining to me also, it's like, I'm a journalist and I'm a cis woman and I'm asking pretty generic questions because that's my goal for my story. And
Mhm.
I had actually spoken to a bunch of LGBTQ activists before interviewing her with her. And I was like, what are some things I should ask? Right. Like that one question about the material harm, that was from another activist that was like, you have to push her on this. She has to answer it. So,
Yeah.
and the great placement stuff was from this Jewish journalist who wanted me to ask about that. So like I had sort of crowdsourced a lot of questions, but I understand from a person that is directly harmed by her policies, like, I'm not debating her. I'm not responding to her. And that's infuriating. I could imagine watching that. It's like if I watch a video of like someone interviewing some misogynist like Andrew Tate, and he's like, yeah, women don't deserve rights. And I'm like, okay. Well, anyway, what do you think of that? Like, people
Yeah.
aren't in an interview. They're used to watching YouTube debates and other things. And I think that they are not used to seeing a reporter do an interview that's ultimately the product was the article that I wrote. The product was not the YouTube video, even though I know that of course clips spread online. And so I get it. Like it's annoying and it's infuriating. And you're like, why isn't she pushing back? Why is she why, and I didn't really think of that when I put the video up because I wasn't thinking of that, but I can totally understand where people have come or I was just thinking of, like, myself because I hate
Yeah.
Andrew Tate saying the most misogynist stuff, but it's like, when you're affected by this stuff and you hear these people saying this, like, I get it. I understand. And but the thing is, what I would say to those people is, like, 1, I don't actually I'm not knowledgeable enough to have that debate in a way that I would feel comfortable with. I actually think, like, an LGBTQ person should be the one to if she would never probably agree to it, but do an actual debate. And 2, that's not really my job as a journalist. so I could get in trouble for that. I would not be allowed to do that. And also I think it would take away from the point of the interview, which is really just to get her on the record on all of the stuff that she's refused to answer. Like the replacement stuff, other journalists have tried to get a comment from her on that stuff, and she's never responded. And so I was sort of just trying to do that.
Yeah,
But I get it. And Blue Sky drives me crazy because of course, then I can't fucking handle it. And I should just be like, guys, thank you for the feedback and log off. But instead, I'm like, you idiots, like, please learn some media literacy. And I think, like, I don't know, when I talked to Katie finally, and she was explaining to me why people were mad, I was like, okay, I get it. It's just a lot because I was
yeah.
dealing with all of the right wing people. I was dealing with her. And then I like randomly had all these people that I'm like, I fucking agree with you. I'm on your side. Like, and by the way, I would have never posted that video without having people review it first, like, too. I mean, that video went through, not only did it go through the entire Washington Post standards department, but like I sent it to literally every LGBTQ activist that I knew. That's how Ari Drennan had those clips ready to go as well. Like I had was like, is this going to be harmful if I put it online? Because I just didn't want anything, you know, happen in that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, people were like, no, she looks terrible. And ultimately it hurt her. So like this idea that interviewing her, reporting critically on her is beneficial, again, is a very that is a you that is a very wrong take. I don't know how else to tell you. That's not how media power online works. But I think there's this reflexive thing, and I get it.
Yeah, and
That's my bad for tweeting it. I tweeted it in an insane way. I deleted or I blue skied it, and like
yeah, it's
the
an it
I was like, I think I tweeted like all caps, like, watch,
oh, no.
we discuss like, do trans people deserve rights? Like, watch me and Chaya Raitek like discuss, and then it's just like me asking questions and not pushing back. Like I would be incensed also.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I can definitely see that, like, as a
I can't hear you.
oh, hello? Um, let's see
No.
here. Hello? Testing, testing.
Oh, that's so weird. I totally lost you. Hold on. Let me make sure in settings. Hold on.
Test, test,
Oh, it's
test.
on me. It's on me. Hold on. Okay, I hear you again. Sorry. I didn't
Okay,
hear you.
cool.
That's why I kept talking. Oh my god.
No, it's okay, it's okay. What you had to say, I think, was good. But it does seem like the kind of, scenario where, like, there was just a miscommunication where, like, people who might not know you, like, or be familiar with your work, like, saw a video-less post, and as a trans person, I watched that, knowing being a bit more familiar with your work, and I was like, this is brilliant. Because honestly, like, the fact that the questions are kind of basic really just kind of shows that she had no idea what she was talking about.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of a wonderful unmasking, but I can see from what you're saying about Blue Sky that, like, that could easily trip up people who aren't as familiar, and
I think
also people who might have misconstrued what the purpose of the interview was, because it
also
wasn't supposed to be
people
content.
no, and also no, it's just also like my job is to not that's not my job. My job is to write these articles. And then they were sort of like, once people are mad, they want to like do a bad faith reading of everything. And so they read this article, which I do not know how you could take issue with that article because that article is like it's just an indictment of her and her role in Oklahoma and just like the harm that she's caused. And it does center the stories of these LGBTQ people. Obviously, we have to talk about her. It's about her, but it's really about the harm she's caused. And there was a 17-year-old that I quoted that we used their full name, and somebody was like, "Oh, and you used a minor's full, you doxed a minor." No, this person is a young activist and said, and by the way, I had them clear it with their parents. Like, I'm very careful about that. But this idea that it's unethical to quote LGBTQ youth under their names, I think is really patronizing. Like, I'm very careful about quoting people. And by the way, I will always, which most reporters don't do, like allow people to go by assumed names or nicknames or whatever they feel comfortable with. But if I talk to a 17-year-old activist and they're like, I want this. I wanna write an op-ed one day. I wanna make I'm trying to, push change in my state, like, platform me, put my name in there. I'm gonna do that. I'm not gonna deny them that platform because I'm like, "Oh, sorry, you're like a year shy of 18, and, people on Blue Sky think that you are too young to be speaking out." It's like, these people wanna speak out. They're the most affected by her policies. So, I thought that was really it bothered me, and I even called, the teenager too, because I was like, "Did I make a mistake?" And they were like, "No, this has been great. Like, fuck her, and I wanna be on the record saying that because, you know." And I had a similar conversation with I just did the piece on the Planet Fitness stuff that she's been doing, which we used a photo for the main photo is a LGBTQ teenager and his boyfriend, and he talks about feeling unsafe. He's in Oklahoma. He talks about the bomb threats and how he actually, had a horrible homophobic experience at his previous gym. He went to Planet Fitness and, like, I talked like, he had to talk to his parents as well. Like, it's not like this stuff is just random. There's so much time and effort that goes into these articles behind the scenes, and I wish that people would know. I totally understand the skepticism because a lot of journalists are very irresponsible, but I try to not ever do that.
Yeah, totally. Like, I think a lot of people become acclimated to, especially on like YouTube, Twitch. You know, a lot of a lot of these apps. Like a lot of the people who aren't journalists also don't do those things. You know, that there isn't like that those safety measures taken. Generally speaking, some people do, but I think a lot of people come at for some reason, a lot of people come at your content assuming that you don't take any of those precautions.
I know, and I get it because it's the media, and the media is bad, and the media has done trans people so dirty, and I understand that Chaya would probably never sit down with a trans person in the way that she would sit down with me, and that's fucked up. I totally agree with that. I would love to see her debate an actual LGBTQ person because I'm sure they would wipe the floor with her, but,
Oh, I would love it.
um, it would be so great, and I'm sure she'll never agree to it, but, I get it, and I think I was kind of being a bitch on Blue Sky about it, and I should have been nicer, but it was just infuriating to me because I was like, "Oh my god, please, like, you guys, that's not it." But whatever, it's just context collapse, and I think it's I should take the L because I tweeted it. Like, if I had framed it differently, I think it would have been received very differently, and that's on me. So,
um, well, I we've been talking now for about an hour. I don't know how much time you have or how
sorry to
much
be
bandwidth.
ranting for so
No,
long. I'm like, "Oh my god, let me, like, to tell you."
it's okay. I have like more questions for you, but if you have to like head out or you're more than welcome to come back on a new night to continue talking. But I just wanted to offer you like an out in case like we've used up all your time.
No, I'm happy to chat for a little bit more. I'm gonna probably make food in, like, 10 minutes, but happy to chat more
Okay.
if you wanna chat
Yeah,
about other stuff.
for sure. I was curious. Like you've been doing like a lot of coverage recently about like the pro-Palestinian protests that are getting coverage on Twitch and a lot of social media platforms, but in particular, you wrote about Twitch, the student protests, etc. Like, what's kind of your view on streaming kind of maturing into a place where people are getting their news content?
Yeah, I think it can be good and bad. I mean, the one thing that I appreciated and what I wanted to write about the Twitch streamers that have been covering the student encampments is I think the mainstream media coverage, especially from places like the New York Times on the student protests and the war generally has been abysmal and horrible. And I think it's a great thing if people can get actual unfiltered news from Twitch streamers if they're responsible. Unfortunately, there's a lot of like inflammatory right wing streamers as well, and that's worrying. I really wish that the traditional media would just do their job, but in light of that, I think it's positive, and I think it's positive that more progressive Twitch streamers are feeling like they can develop an audience through that type of activism. I think for a while it was like Hassan and not that many other people were able to really like get an audience. And I think that now it's grown into this whole ecosystem online of Twitch, and there's a lot more cross pollination from Twitch and YouTube, like the creators for Palestine stuff. Like a lot of those people are just big YouTubers that were on Twitch, and um, so I just think that that's really positive. And I think that I totally support young people getting their news and information from those sources because they are more reliable on this issue than the traditional media. I think you just have to be careful like what influencer you're following and what streamer you're following because some streamers have had very obviously they're doing terrible.
Yeah.
So don't follow the bad ones.
Yeah, kind of circling back even to kind of connect this topic. You said earlier, like with the downfall of outlets like Mike and whatnot, um, a lot of the pathways into journalism have kind of been like closed off. Do you view this as like kind of a way for people to get involved in journalism in
Yeah.
this way? Is this a new
Yeah.
venue? Is this the new ladder?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the entry point into media now is just solely through social media. So you have people building up audiences online, on Substack, on Twitch, on YouTube, whatever. And then sometimes they enter the traditional media. I actually think more commonly they just end up going into their own media ecosystem. And I think that's truly been, I mean, this is what my whole book is about, but like the actual digital media revolution has been these people building their own audiences online. I think news organizations are generally very nervous to interact with those people or hire them because they don't know like the skill sets are not always aligned and also like if you've built a whole audience on social media to the point that you're monetizing it and you're doing well, you don't know how to work for these traditional places. Um, so I think, yeah, I think it's really the only option for young people. Some young people, of course, they're going to graduate and get the, like the nepotism kids that get their like internship at the Atlantic or whatever. Those kids are still going to be able to get into traditional media, but I think traditional media is increasingly, it's like it's just up, it's like in a totally different side of the media world almost. There's not that like crossover.
Yeah, do you kind of see I don't know, do you see mainstream media kind of embracing these more individualistic like streamers or
No,
do
they
you
don't like them because
Yeah.
they challenge the traditional media. They're a threat to the traditional media. Um, and I think they're really sometimes the only ones holding traditional media to account. Unfortunately, because traditional media has been so bad, you also have this entire right-wing ecosystem that's also hating on traditional media. So it's like, yeah, traditional media is bad, but not for the reasons that those people think it's bad. It's bad for other reasons. I think it depends on the media organization too. There's just not that many left. I mean, when you look around, everywhere I
Yeah,
ever wanted to work is out of business, and I'm like,
or it's owned
you
by a
know,
billionaire.
or owned by a billionaire, which I don't love that,
Yeah.
but these
Um,
platforms are also owned by billionaires own everything in the country. So,
true.
but I think it's good to I really support actual independent journalism, and I just don't think we have very much of any of it in this country, in large part because everyone that's doing that is sued out of existence by people, like people like Peter Thiel.
Yeah, it's what's troubling to me is that it seems like the bar it seems like both sides you kind of talked about this divide between like right wing media and kind of this left wing up and coming ecosystem of streamers. And one of the things that's really been disturbing to me about the right wing ecosystem that's been developing is the reliance and prevalence of conspiracy theories. Um,
Mhm.
like I saw that there was like a TikTok trend about how the sun doesn't cause skin cancer.
Yeah, that's
That
not even
was
a TikTok, that's all over Instagram too. I mean, this has actually become a pretty common belief on the right, is that the sun doesn't cause skin cancer. What causes skin cancer, by the way, this is all false, is actual eating seed oils and that makes your skin more susceptible. And also, I mean, the one thing, it's like there's always a half truth, right? Like they also talk about the toxicity of sunscreen. They are correct in the sense that a lot of sunscreen has really crappy additives and phthalates, and that's bad. Sunscreen itself is good. So try to get the best sunscreen you can, but putting sunscreen on for a couple hours, even if it has those bad chemicals, is still worth it because the sun is also really bad and you want to protect yourself.
Yeah, I it's insane to me just watching a lot of this come up, and if I'm being completely honest, like the sun doesn't cause skin cancer is almost like one of the most benign ones that I see circulating. And I don't I wanted to ask, do you see a path forward for like the internet to function? Because I look at that and I look at the rise of like AI and AI generated content that is then fed on this type of conspiracism, and
Yeah.
kind of like the prevalence and of these AI generated articles and content pieces. Is there a path forward out of this, out of the conspiracy?
I think media literacy. I don't think it's anything these platforms can. I mean, great. These platforms should. I actually don't trust the platforms to crack down on misinformation. I think that is a bad, bad thing that we are asking. I think liberals love to ask for that. It's like conservatives just want to ban speech because they want no LGBTQ content online,
Mhm.
and then liberals want everything that they disagree with taken offline, which is really hard to do at scale. So then the companies just bluntly, for instance, what Meta's doing, block all politics content. All of this is bad. We need media. The fundamental issue is that these platforms are going to rise and fall. There's new things every day. We need media literacy. And conservatives have spent decades dismantling our public education system. And we have just the lowest of the low in terms of media literacy online. So that's what I mean, I just try to do that with my own work is educate people about these dynamics at play and try to help people understand their information environment because it's nuanced. I mean, especially I would say since the pandemic started is when it's gotten really bad because people have gone the we lost the digital media world. The traditional media has gone off the rails. Like everybody's just getting more and more of their information from these online sources and they have no idea how to navigate them and they're more online than ever. Everyone's getting more and more online. So and with AI it's going to be worse. So yeah, and just the dismantling of public health, like, the fact that, like, the sunscreen thing, like, that couldn't happen 5 years ago. We all
Mhm.
had a much better understanding of health and public health. Now, most Americans believe that getting a virus is good for you, and I'm talking about liberals and conservatives alike. That's crazy. That is a fundamentally anti-vax idea. That is what leads to things like chickenpox parties. So no, we shouldn't we need to we need to educate people on, like, so many levels. Um
And then that brings us back to I I try to have hope. I try to not doom her too much, but then I remember like Bill Gates on a whim like dismantled like so many school systems by offering grants to try and redirect public school uh programs and public
And we have
school. Oh,
record numbers of kids entering into the homeschool ecosystem since the
yes.
pandemic started. And by the way, I'm actually a huge supporter of untraditional like, I don't I have a terrible learning disability, like, I'm dyslexic, like, public school was so hard for me. I think that alternative education models are good.
Mhm.
However, most of many, I don't know if it's most, many people homeschooling their kids are just indoctrinating them and they're trying to, and that's really dangerous. So I think it's going to take decades to kind of unravel what we've done, but it could get better. I'm like an optimist, so don't be a doomer. It's going to like something will things can change very quickly. And they can change very quickly for the worse, but it's important to remember that they can also change really quickly for the better.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, there's I grew up in Minnesota, and I spent a fair amount of time in rural areas of Minnesota, and a lot of my friends and a lot of really great people that I know like grew up homeschooled, but it's also like there's such a prevalence of like uh fundamentalist religious
Yeah.
programs out there. It's It's wild, but I think you're right. Like I think that there is hope for the future, and it's that hope is where it's always been in one another, in people, in working together to overcome these hurdles. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're gonna be fine. Don't worry about it.
um, well, thank you for coming on tonight. Taylor Lorenz, author of Extremely Online, The Untold Story of Fame, Influence, and Power on the Internet. Everyone go check it out because it has a lot more stuff in it than what we've discussed today.
Also, I have a podcast called Power
Yes.
User, so please listen.
Very good podcast.
On YouTube.
I am subscribed.
Thank you. Well, thanks for
And
having me. This
yeah,
was so fun.
do you? I'll give you the final word. Whatever you want to say.
Subscribe to Power User. No, this was really fun. I don't have anything else, but also reach out to me anytime. I love hearing from people. If there's ever anything that should be on my radar that I should cover, my DMs are open. I'm bad. Like I read them even if I don't respond. So please send me anything. I try to respond, but yeah, reach out anytime. And sorry I had a meltdown on Blue Sky that one day, but I promise I'm actually a normal person and
that's okay. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. Go make your food. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Bye. That was really great. I enjoyed that a lot. Let me fix this here. Just popping out, popping back in. Close out of that. Add my beautiful mug. Are we gonna? Oh, let's try this again. There we go. Yoink. Perfect. Hello, everybody. That was a really fun interview. That was really, really fun. I enjoy talking with folks, and I really, really was looking forward to talking with Taylor Lorenz. She's been so lovely in DMs. Like I knew this conversation would be really great. Yeah. And also, let me just make sure. Oh, I have a button on this. Perfect. Hello. You're both adorable. It was, I think that was both a pleasant and very important conversation. Like I genuinely, I think that like Taylor Lorenz is dynamite. She covers so many of the things that are pivotal to like understanding both like modern politics and like the modern tech landscape. It's really, really great. As for her show here, just real quick, wanna shout out. There we go. I want to shout this out. Her YouTube is great. Also need to add my camera back over here. There we go. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. And yeah, the last episode that got put up, this tech dystopia one, is very good. I would say it's if you have had a tough time understanding like how Silicon Valley works, I and like why these Silicon Valley tech people who are so isolated and weird and don't seem to operate in a way that makes sense. If you've ever wondered about that, listen to that episode, because the guest she has on, whose name is Gil Duran. Go check that out.